Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Market Trade Group, and it is Tuesday, April 28th. And theme of the day, I would call it Rotation City. We saw this yesterday as well, where we saw the small caps outperform. This was another day where we came in and they ripped the futures up in the pre-market session. I don't know. I never understand why they do that. I think it also has to do with where overnight markets are. For example, U.S. futures will typically follow what Europe does. So if Europe is up a lot, then there are what's known as there's relationships. So I think if you had to blame someone for why futures are up so much this morning, was probably Europe. But if you looked at the small caps this morning, they were up about 3% going into the open. So unfortunately, the trade that usually takes place when this happens is you try to sell some things on the open. Now, if you're not positioned long in IWM and small caps, then it's tough to kind of sell things, because we did see some rotation out of tech today and into some of those things like the home builders were up a lot, and just overall value. So the main question is, right? People see this, and we joked around about this yesterday too, because last week it was everybody says, "Oh, the FANG stocks are up. These are the only stocks that are pulling the market higher." This is this is my media voice, by the way. Oh, this is unhealthy for the market when you only have a small group of stocks, even though they really weren't doing the research that they should be doing, because as we've been saying for the last couple of weeks, it's not just the FANG stocks, it was the healthcare and the biotech stocks. All right, so those were the ones that were really the outperformers. But you're going to see rotation from time to time. Is that a bad thing? So now we're hearing the argument, and I heard this a lot today. Well, this is a bad sign. The market leaders are selling off. So, you can't have it both ways, right? You can't criticize the market when the FANG stocks are up and other things are underperforming. And then when it's vice versa, then when that happens, you can't criticize both sides. So here's my take. This is something that we've been talking about for a while, right? We've been talking about how this biotech trade got pretty overcrowded, right? So we'll kind of start, because this has been the market leader. There's been no doubt. But this did get hit today. This was down 3% for the day. Closed on the lows from where it opened. Big red candle for the day. Notice as well, what we talked about a week ago was this version point of control taken out. Usually that kind of marks a good amount of digestion, sometimes a fade afterwards. We didn't get that right away. We've been holding this trend, but it is what it is. Like if you've been trading for a while, that the risk to reward is kind of it's not there anymore. Once we move up to one of these, right? Look at the one that was taken out to the downside. And that was the third one that was taken out to the downside. But notice we don't have another one up there. So we took this thing out the one day, and it's been kind of digesting a little bit. Now, the other thing that we've noticed, so again, I would call this pretty overcrowded. I've seen a lot of ETF fund. I think for the last 3 weeks, I've seen about $1 billion added to healthcare and biotech ETFs each week. So it is what it is. The trades get overcrowded. And what happens after all that money, comes into a particular group? $3 billion basically week after week after week. Or sorry, $1 billion, but total of $3 billion. There's no incremental buyer. Right? No one else can basically buy this. The buyers are exhausted. And then what happens is there's sellers who want to take profits, and there's nobody really left to buy at this point. So that's kind of what you have, and rotations are quite normal. The charts that I've been talking about for a while, and if you're a regular viewer of my video, you know that I've brought this chart up quite a bit. This is the IWM versus the Qs. We talked about how that there was a bullish divergence for the small caps. And so the only problem with this, because I literally have been going over this for the last couple of weeks, you just don't know exactly when that outperformance is going, and when the selling is going to happen. Now, we do have a catalyst, right? We've talked about as well, once they start to reopen the country, all these areas that have been suffering, the retail names, the travel names. And if the financials, which are backing, these names, once they are talking about reopening, and once the probability gets closer, you're going to see a rotation out of a lot of, the Teladoc, the Zoom, all the hiding places that have been in. So this is quite normal. Because the reason why I'm just going over this is because what happens is people jump to conclusions because they see one day of selling. Now, we still have to watch this because we saw this, if you remember, we saw this I think it was last Wednesday. We saw a big sell off in growth too, and it was just one day. And that was enough to bring buyers back in. So you just kind of have to realize this, as I've been saying in the market, in the member videos. One of the points that I made and try to hammer home was that don't put your eggs in a hole, especially like once different groups like healthcare and heavy growth and technology, once they get overbought like this and have made a significant move, it is your job to not put all your eggs in one basket and have all your trades into growth, because this ratio, right, has gotten really stretched. And that's why I think I made it a point in the last 2 weekend videos saying just be cognizant about how far growth is outperforming value, right? And the analogy that I always use for something like this is a rubber band, right? The rubber band gets stretched more and more and more and more and more and more, and then the farther it gets stretched, once the rubber band snaps, you get a pretty decent reaction back. So I think that's what we have, and it could last another day or two, because these groups like biotech and so forth, I mean, are out to 52-week highs in a very difficult environment. So you just kind of have to take that, and it's all about trade. It's all about, in trading, I always come back to risk to reward, right? What's your reward versus your risk? Chasing up basically all the way up here. You could still participate because, listen, no one knows when a trend is going to stop. And no one has a crystal ball that's going to tell you when a trend is going to stop. You could look at things like overbought and so forth, but and by the way, look at the last one that was taken out too. All the way back in December. That also caused a decent move down. So that's the situation that we're in right now. Did I trade perfectly today? No, I did not trade perfectly today. I didn't. I really did not have a great day. Here's what I said earlier this morning. Right? I said, guys, in my opinion, best to just get out of the way when some of these rotations are happening. Let them, the mistakes that I've made previously, and I will continue to make some mistakes, but as the rotations are happening and people are, funds, when I say people, it's funds, institutions, as they're rotating out of different groups, let them do it. Don't try to catch not a falling knife per se, but as they're selling and selling, don't try to outsmart them and get in front of a, get in front of a truck, basically saying, oh, this is a good buying opportunity. Wait until they're done. Right? It was the same thing, just to kind of give you another example. It's the same thing when the market was doing this. The institutions, were selling, and I know everybody was trying to pick the bottom here. So, you will see it basically take its place. So, by the way, for the overall market, and we did a midday video too, where I wanted to make sure that you guys were just aware and weren't overreacting to what you were seeing on the tape. But notice as well, because then again, I see people saying, "Oh, we ran into major resistance." I don't think we did. I think we heard that people say that last week too, and the week before that, and about resistance. It's no joke, right? So you could say that today if it makes you feel comfortable saying, "Oh, we ran into major resistance today." But I tell you, I saw many people telling me the exact same thing last week. Well, we ran into major resistance. That's what it is. Right? Remember when this happened? People were drawing the line here and saying, "Oh, we broke it. We broke it. We're going down." And we fell right into support. The other thing that people were doing too. People were doing this last week too. Oh, let's draw a trend line here. Oh, look at the VIX. break this downward trend line, and the VIX, and I was watching too, as the VIX went up to a 45. But remember this? Everybody posting the chart of the VIX last week saying, "Oh, here we go. We're going to have volatility come all the way back here," and it stalled out after 2 days, right? So basically, what I'm getting at is try not to jump to major conclusions about these things. Take it one day at a time. Continue to watch your support, and if we do break some things, like if you're holding some names and they break support, make sure you're acting on them. I could tell you, I made a mistake at the end of the day. I got into some Zoetis yesterday, ZTS, and it did break support, and I kind of just acted a little bit frozen at the end of the day. I just didn't want to sell a name down 3.5%. I know this happens to everybody, right? We see a name that we get into and it doesn't work. So this could be a name that causes me some pain. Whenever I don't take a stop, it causes me pain. Sometimes when I do take a stop, and the next day it flies higher. So it's just how it works. But this doesn't look good. This is a name that I got into yesterday, added to it, hoping that it would kind of hold midday. It did not. So really, what I should have done is taken the stop on it. Again, the reason why I go over this stuff is because everybody's human. And I know there's guys on Twitter who all they do is they retweet, they do victory laps when they get like they cured cancer, when they got a trade rate right. But it is what it is. Trading is difficult, and you could see me kind of go back and forth with some things this morning. So again, this is probably my worst day in about 2 weeks, but because I didn't trade very well, and so again, there's always things to improve on. A couple things that I thought. So again, I share this with you, and I hope that you realize that people are every trader, no matter how much experience they have, they're human and do make mistakes. So that was my kind of mistake for the day. But realize too, you're going to have winners and you're going to have losers, right? And how you manage the losers can really make or break what you're doing. We caught a nice earnings trade with the zebra on the positive side. Also, I like the price action that's going on in the solar names. Which SEDG, I did take a target in this one. It did come in. I've got a stop that's a little bit far away, about 105. But these solar names can be very volatile, so you got to make sure that you're, that you're putting on the correct position size, which you should be adjusting to depending on how volatile the name is as well. Again, everything that we're going over is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice recommendations. But this is one of those groups that I did like to see begin to outperform. I know a lot of people like this ENPH, which was up a lot too. The only thing I don't like about this ENPH, which we looked at a few times, I looked at it a few times last week, is it's in value, and now it has rallied up to resistance, which is basically where you want to be taking a profit. Now again, this is a 15% move from where it was, and it resolved itself higher, but it's right into the top of resistance. What else for trading? I really wanted to have on Microsoft for a run into earnings, but it's just not happening. So I took off. I tried adding Microsoft in today's weakness, and that rotation out of growth, which I don't even view Microsoft as such a big growth name, but who knows? Maybe this will set up a better earnings trade. Certainly, I mean, if you look at what Google did, today, Google was down all day today, down 3% today, and then it rallies back, and it's basically back to the open. So I think that we're going to see more and more of this through earnings, where it's just too difficult for really. There are going to be some names that beat and raise and all that. There's just going to be few and far between, I think. I think AMD is kind of looking like an opportunity. Remember, these are the earnings trades that I did today. I sold. I'm sticking with the selling premium, so I did that for Google. The iron condor that I did may have been a little bit too tight. I did go ahead and buy some shares to kind of protect that. So I sold the put spread and I sold the call spread. The only thing is my call spread may be a little bit too close here, and so that's why I went ahead and bought some shares at 1272 in the after hours. Here is my thoughts on AMD. AMD is a tough name. They were implying a 9% move, so I didn't do anything with this one. I own it in one of my portfolios, but I've said before this is a name, a better name to buy post earnings if we get a dip. I'm looking for this thing to come in a little bit more to about like $50, but it hasn't gone in. It's not, that might be all that we get. It did break value here. I see some levels down at 49.68, and there's a 5-minute VPOC down here too, which I would love for this thing to get down to. And I'll just wait for a second for that to fill in. Down here at 49.80. But this happens to AMD a lot. And if you look at the earnings history, which is a pretty good tell sometimes for names, unless something significantly has changed with their business. But there's a lot of times when AMD has sold off on earnings and it ends up being a buying opportunity. So I'd like to see it come in a little bit further. All right, guys. So that's the end of day video. Again, take things one day at a time and don't get spooked. When very overcrowded areas see a little bit of a rotation and profit taking in them. It's quite normal. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.